What revenge of yours hit the victim way worse than you thought it would, to the point you said maybe I shouldn't have done that? I was dating this girl and my friend saw her around town a few times and humiliated her in an effort to embarrass me. I told him to stop bothering her, but he did it again. That night I convinced him to try getting back together with his wildly insane and manipulative ex that he hadn't spoken to in years, thinking that he would just humiliate himself by trying. Well, they banged and got back together for a while. And had a baby. Now they're terrible single parents. Jesus, I think the consequences from this one are the worst in the thread. He didn't just F up their lives, he assisted in the creation of a new effed up life. The husband of a friend of mine was teasing me incessantly at a game night. I had finally had enough and snapped at him. You must not have had a very good mother. Turns out he was adopted. In elementary school there was a bully kid who would make fun of me. I had a bad bowl cut and was pretty small, so it wasn't surprising. Me and my friends usually just ignored him. Anyway, one day this kid from Brazil moved into the house next to mine. He was a year older. We used to play soccer together every day after school. I mentioned to him once that this kid would call me names and usually while walking home from school, would follow behind me taunting me. One day I'm leaving school and this kid is going slowly behind me on his bike shouting stuff. Just dumb kid stuff, you know. Brazil kid comes out of nowhere, knocks the kid off his bike and just starts beating him. Bully is on the grass crying and bleeding. Brazil kid grabs the bike and gives it to me. You can keep this, and then walks away. I didn't know what to do. I just laid the bike next to the kid and walked home. He wasn't at school for like a week. Later in life I found that kid had a really crappy home situation with abusive parents. I was 10 at the time. Always felt bad for that. Quit bullying me though. I still occasionally see that Brazilian guy. Don't think he even remembers it. Cool on him for helping in his way. I just think it went too far. Any bowl cut is a bad bowl cut. Watch out. Some Brazilian guy's gonna come F you up and hand OP the keys to your car. My friends and I used to pull a lot of pranks on each other growing up, and about 10 years ago I was helping my buddy set up a new business. He was ordering business cards and the company he was going through was offering I think 500 or so free with a large order, so we decided to prank our other friend. We made business cards with his name, phone number, home address and had his job title as professional creep, with the slogan if I'm creepin', you ain't sleepin'. We passed these cards out all over town. He was getting really harassing phone calls for a while and couldn't figure out why. After about 2 years he found one of the cards on a random fridge at a party and put 2 and 2 together. He was pissed and is still getting random calls 10 years later. I feel really bad about that one. Had a lawyer a few years back who was a piece of absolute shit. Would go months between returning phone calls. Constantly late with court filings to the point the courts multiple times moved to have the case dismissed from lack of action. Lied to me constantly about anything and everything. Refused to be fired. Seriously, when I told him he was fired he just ignored me and kept presenting himself as my lawyer. I had to get the courts involved to get him to stop. Lied about me. Our client has been unreachable. We are considering dropping them. I tried to call you 84 times in the last 3 months, and you didn't answer or return a single one. When I finally did fire him, he told me I had to be in court on a specific date. That didn't work for me. At a specific time. That didn't work for me, or else the motion to withdraw wouldn't be accepted. So I got to the courtroom and the judge was super nice, but confused as to why I was there, and when I told him the story the judge just goes, "Yay, this is all done electronically." Not sure why your lawyer would tell you that other than to be a dick. Needless to say, by the end of all this I was pissed and wrote a 10-page bar complaint about 4 different lawyers and their offices' unethical behavior. Well, the Bar Association decided this was a firm-wide encouraged pattern of behavior, and threw the book at the 4 partners. Disbarred for 5 years, restitution to clients, and only allowed to practice under supervision for a period of 5 years after they return. I felt a little bad, but goddamn I was so effing sick of being jerked around. My brother and cousins were walking home from school. Well, my brother and I were walking and my cousins were on bikes. They kept circling us and making fun of us because we didn't have bikes. one of my cousins then spits on me. Out of reflex, I blasted her with my trumpet case and she went flying, landed on the concrete and broke her arm. I felt awful. It was the first and last time I ever hit a girl. My family believed every word of the story, knew this cousin was always a total bitch to me, and largely believed she had it coming. I still felt awful though. When I was in 5th grade, my teacher gave out a shit ton of homework one day, so I got the whole class to help me write a letter to the principal. She found out and cried and shit. I felt really horrible because she was just trying to get us ready for a test coming up. I still feel really bad every time I think about it. Oh, I have one for this. My grandpa was a bit old school and gave me prison yard advice for my first week of school. He said, if anyone picks on you, just deal with them right then. Don't take it. First week of kindergarten, a grade 1 kid was pushing me around, not letting me go back to class. I pushed him down against a fence and kicked him in the face 3 or 4 times, splitting his nose. Almost got kicked out of school, until they found out my grandpa had told me to do it. Thing is, no one messed with me after, and that guy was nice to me all the way through to graduation. So, grandpa gave you good advice, huh? The best. I used it again in middle school, with the same level of success. A kid on my track team would always come by and take a drink of whatever I had with me. I was sick of it and brought a root beer with me which had been spiked with 3 times the recommended dose of root beer flavored X-Lax. Sure enough, he came by and I said, you know what, Tony, why don't you just take the whole thing? Well, we were having a home meet that day and he was our best pole vaulter, and part of the relay team. I thought maybe he'd feel a little off and under pre-form. In the midst of our warm-ups, he went missing and was absent the entire meet. Back in my early 20s, I was working a shit job in the mall. I'd only been working there for about a month when I was promoted to key holder over a guy who started before me. The dude had been a real flake as long as I'd known him, so I wasn't surprised. Apparently he'd been promised the position and was really upset at me. For the next month he was a huge dick to me. Swiping sales, complaining to the manager about me, slyly effing up cleaning projects or displays I had done, and informing the manager that I'd failed to do something. After a full month of his bullshit, I eventually snapped. At a few of the local plant nurseries you can buy jars of ladybugs for $10. I bought 3, which was somewhere between 2 and 5,000 ladybugs. I swiped his keys from the break room while I was on lunch, found his cute new Saturn, and dumped all 3 containers on the floor of his back seat. We closed together that night, so we ended up walking out to the parking lot together after dropping the cash off at the deposit box. I was parked further out, so he got to his car before I did, and I was able to get a peek at my handiwork. It looked like something from a horror film. The ladybugs had swarmed the entire inside of his car, and in the dim light you couldn't really tell what they were, only that the car was full on infested with bugs. The dude had a reffing breakdown right there in the parking lot. Just absolutely lost his mind. I enjoyed the scene at first, but the longer it went on the worse I felt. After he calmed down enough to start making sense, he barreled into this monologue about how he was sure it was the girl from the pretzel stand, because he'd been such a huge asshole to her, and he starts crying. He goes on about how he deserves this for being so awful, and then apologizes to me for being such a dick, and keeps going on about how he brought this on himself. It was pretty bad. I offered him a ride home, now feeling really guilty, and when I dropped him off he thanked me for being so nice to him, despite all the awful stuff he'd done. He said his mother was undergoing cancer treatment and it wasn't going well. Oof. He apologized again and I didn't see him for a few days. Shit between us at work improved a lot, but I still felt guilty as F. He had to sell the car a few months later because the Texas heat had killed all the ladybugs and he couldn't get the smell of them out of the vehicle. His mom died a little while after that and he ghosted the job. F. I still think about that dude even now. The revenge felt so righteous when I did it, but afterwards it was nothing but guilt. I think I have told this before, but I think I was 15 and was in class and sat next to a friend of mine. He, for no reason, began to say, "Ha, your bald father," which I followed up with, "Ha, your bald mother." He started crying and ran to the teacher. I honestly forgot his mom had cancer and was getting chemo. This one wasn't really a planned revenge, but it's one I still feel guilty about whenever I think about it. When I was a kid I was extremely easy to scare with jump scares, and I hated them. I would always enter fight or flight mode whenever something jumped out at me, and then I'd be mad as hell afterward. When my buddies caught onto this they made it their business in life to jump out at me and scare me any chance they got. Despite my hate of being scared I was a huge fan of Halloween, and I had a Halloween party every year either close to or on the big day. Naturally this was the night when all my friends would do their damnedest to scare me so bad that I would bolt and run. They succeeded a few times when we were all under 9 years old, but something shifted in me the year I turned 10, and none of us knew it until it was too late. As usual I had my big Halloween party, as usual all my buddies were there, and as usual one of them wanted to try and scare the pants off me. About midway through the evening I went down the hall to use the restroom, and while I was in there my friend, I'll call him Aaron, scampered down the hall after me and hid in a darkened doorway. I came out of the restroom, started down the hall, and Aaron jumped out at me and grabbed my arm. Ordinarily something like this would have made me bolt like a little chicken shit, but for some reason that night the flight side of my fight or flight got turned off. The moment he grabbed me I whirled and punched him square in the face without even thinking about what I was doing. It was all pure instinct and after impact I realized what I'd just done and freaked out. Aaron wrenched his mask off and was clutching his face and groaning, or so I thought, and I yelled for my dad, concerned I had really hurt my friend. My dad and all my other friends came running down the hall to find out what had happened. My dad flipped on the hallway light, and what greets us? Aaron with his face covered in blood. I am instantly horrified, thinking I busted his nose, but as I'm spewing apologies to him I begin to realize he's not groaning, he's laughing. He grabs me by the hand I'd punched him with and yells, "What are you apologizing for? That was freaking awesome." And he yanked my hand up over my head like I was a boxing champ, and starts telling everyone how cool it was of me to just haul off and slug him. If you haven't guessed, Aaron was a pretty cool kid. He thought it was great that I'd suddenly found the courage to defend myself. My dad helped get him cleaned up, though he insisted on keeping his now bloody costume on, and inspected his nose. Thankfully it wasn't actually broken, but I still feel a wave of guilt when I remember the sight of his face covered in blood, and remember the feeling of my fist hitting him in the nose. I'll always be grateful to him for handling it so well, and encouraging me for standing up for myself, but I still feel so guilty about decking him that I can't even imagine how I would feel if I had actually broken his nose. Had a roommate who basically let his new girlfriend move into our house in college. She helped herself to everything in the house but never contributed. Finally she parked in my parking spot and that was my breaking point. I let all the air out of all of her tires, thinking she'd just air them back up and it would be an inconvenience. Instead she ended up buying all new tires. Whoops. Never came clean about it. So, she had the money to buy 4 new tires, but couldn't kick in on anything around the house. Way back in elementary school a friend threw a piece of chalk that hit me square in the forehead. It was the most humiliating moment for younger me as everyone who saw that started laughing their asses off. Kids are assholes. I plotted and planned my revenge, to get back in the exact same fashion over the next couple of days. One fine day, weapon in hand, I find him perfectly placed a chalk throw away from me. I yell out his name and quickly launch the projectile as he spins around. For some reason he had his mouth open as he looked at me, and the piece of chalk flew directly into his throat. His eyes widen and he starts choking. I stood frozen in shock as he fell on his knees coughing. Luckily somebody grabbed him from behind and thumped his back, so he swallowed the piece. An adult walks in, cannot remember who it was at the time, but she looks at me and asks what happened. At this point I'm shaking, realizing that I narrowly killed my friend. I say it was a mint. My friend, also shaken at this point, laughs it off saying it went straight into his throat and he didn't taste it. The adult shakes her head and says next time just hand it like a normal person and walks away. Years later when we were moving away to another country I remind him about the incident and come clean about the whole thing. He snaps and yells I knew it. When I was a kid I was at a local river, a great swimming spot lots of people came to. My friend pushes me in the river and naturally I came up spluttering and a little red in the face, but it was all in good fun. For the rest of the day I planned to get her back, waiting for my opportunity to push her in, until she was at the edge of the river drying off. I pushed her, but her flailing and the slippery nature of the rocks she was on made her slip on the spot, and instead of just splashing into the water, she landed on her back hitting the rocks hard, and then fell into the water. She was winded, but thankfully otherwise unharmed. Our parents were furious at me, and I just spent the few seconds it took to get her out. Felt like a lot longer to me, just hoping I hadn't broken her back or something. 2 out of 10 revenge. Would not do again. Edit. Wow, this really blew up. I hope we have all learned not to push people into pools and other bodies of water. When I was bullied by some local kids I filled the petrol tank of their family car with grass, dirt, sticks and stones, bottle caps, pretty much anything I could jam into the petrol tank. I felt sorry for that poor car. I was 11, my older brother was 16. We would fight and argue, but one time I was running up the stairs away from him and he whipped the back of my legs with a long rubber chew toy. It left a pretty big, figure-8 shaped welt on my legs. I knew he was faster and stronger than me and I knew if I tried to attack him he'd stop me. So, I grabbed a flathead screwdriver and held it over the stove until it was red hot. I ran up to him and very openly went to stab him, knowing he'd stop me. He grabbed my wrist to stop my thrust, as anticipated. And I pushed the red hot head of it into his forearm as hard as I could. Man, I was a crazy asshole as a kid. Sorry Mike. Edit. Wow, didn't expect this much response to my weird childhood story. Yes, he had a scar for years. I will never forget the sound of his scream. I felt terrible. Good news, we are now super close. I was the best man at his wedding and I'm godfather to one of his kids. Everything's great between us now. A roommate poured water on me while I was asleep. So I filled all his shoes and the pockets of all his trousers with chili powder. I didn't realize the powder had dye and it stained everything red, including any shirts he had tucked into work trousers and a lot of items he washed with them. I'm guessing he didn't pour water on you again. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more daily Reddit videos.